the Beneficent, the Merciful. May his peace and blessings be upon our holy Prophet Muhammad and upon his holy, sacred family, and may he hasten the reappearance of the awaited Savior, the 12th Imam, Imam al-Hujjat al-Mahdi, Ajjalallahu ta'ala farajahu al-Sharif, and make us among his supporters and helpers. Welcome to another episode of Conversations. Respected viewers, brothers and sisters, in this TV program, we attempt to tackle the real-life daily struggles of converts living in the West. In the previous episode, we addressed several general issues, problems that were commonly encountered by converts related to religious disputation and culturalism in communities. In this episode, we hope to turn to another sensitive topic, which is, for converts, family. Many times, someone who is newly converted to the religion, and unfortunately, oftentimes for years after that, may struggle with issues of abandonment or rejection from their families. At the same time, they're struggling with isolation or a sense of rejection or being on the outs with their new family, which is the community that they're attempting to convert into. I'm Daniel Pizer, and with me is my co-host, Sheikh Yahya Seymour. Assalamu alaikum salam rahmatullah. And inshallah, we will be able to shed some light, or at least to begin to discuss some of these more complex issues. And more than likely, they'll take more than an episode to
without a doubt, without a doubt.
So why don't you begin?
Well, it's
I know you have a lot of personal experiences with this. We all do, but I think yours are certainly can illuminate this issue.
Inshallah ta'ala, I will share what I have, and as a small caveat, just a disclosure to the viewers of this show, I'd like to make clear that my experiences are my experiences. They might be shared by other reverts. You're meant to discipline me every time I use that term, or other converts.
Yeah.
However, one thing that needs to be highlighted, one thing that needs to be made clear to the viewing audience, both convert and non-convert alike, is no doubt our experiences differ. We are not one monolithic group, despite the fact that there are numerous people out there who would like to make us one monolithic group. And so I'd like to just highlight that my convert issues are my own convert issues. They might be experienced by others, but I'm not trying to make out in any way, shape or form that they are shared by all converts. And on that note, I begin in the name of Allah Azza wa Jal, who is the most gracious and the most merciful, and I ask Him to send His peace and blessings upon His final and holy Prophet, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alih, and upon his holy family. May peace and blessings be upon them all, and may He hasten the reappearance of our 12th Imam. May God hasten His reappearance. On this particular issue, I believe I have a particularly fair amount to share on it. It's one which is quite a sensitive topic, and so I ask for the viewer's understanding if at times I seem to get overheated, if I seem to be taking this issue very personally, but at the same time it is a personal issue. And so it's very difficult to distance ourselves from these issues which we've experienced, and particularly ones which I think, unfortunately, are ones which not only have I experienced, but to some degree are ongoing, and particularly my family issues. And I'll come back to that more later. Family issues is an extremely interesting topic in the sense that I believe it's the first thing a convert has to encounter. As I mentioned, some converts have very understanding parents who understand their transition to Islam, but mine were not so understanding. When I say that I converted to Islam, I converted to Islam at the age of 15. However, just as a small caveat, a small disclosure for the viewers, when I say I converted to Islam, we believe that the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam and the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alih are the Sirat al-Mustaqim, which takes us to Allah Azza wa Jal. as our tafsir, our exegetical literature, which explains the Holy Quran, states, when Allah Azza wa Jal says in Surah Al-Fatiha, "Ihdana as-sirat al-mustaqim," may guide us to the straight path. We believe that the Sirat al-Mustaqim is none other than Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. And so when I say that I converted to Islam, what I mean by that is I converted to a distortion of what we believe to be pure Islam. I did not immediately come to Al Muhammad. When I first announced this to my parents, as we observed in the previous episodes, my father is someone that viewed Islam as very much conversion to a different culture, a different ideology.
And the timing was somewhat inauspicious.
Yeah, absolutely. I converted in the year 2002, towards the end of it, albeit. But in the year 2002, of course, 9/11 was still fresh in the minds of the Western world. And so even at that time, I knew at that time, man, I find Islam to be the pure truth, but this is probably the most difficult decision I'm going to make in my life. I knew if I converted to Buddhism, I might experience some harassment. If I converted to Judaism, I might experience some harassment. If I convert to Islam, this is like I am taking dirt from the ground and rubbing it into the eyes of my parents. And when I say dirt here, I don't mean dirt from the holy city of Karbala, although me bringing to Islam to their attention might very well be that, and we'll come to that topic later, inshallah ta'ala. And so you have to understand that I went through a phase in which I was being threatened verbally by my family to be cut off entirely from them as a group of people. I was very much being distanced from emotionally. I was not receiving the kind of support I thought I would be. And everyone in my family started to view me as just a downright weird individual, like the black sheep of the family.
Let me ask you a question about that,
Sure.
too. First of all, how long did you prep, or what was the decision-making process that went into telling your family that you had decided this? Because I can remember for myself that I converted when I was in graduate school in New York City, and I remember thinking, maybe my parents won't react this badly. I have no idea actually what to expect, but how am I going to tell them that? And I just sort of delayed and delayed and delayed because they don't live in New York.
Yeah.
So they came for my graduation from graduate school. And I went up to their hotel room, and they were very, very proud, and they got the champagne out.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
I don't drink anymore. And they thought this was just some other thing, because I was always on some nonconformist kind of whatever. And that's when that conversation happened.
Yeah.
And even that was I had thought it out, and it didn't go like I thought it would. So for you, I'm wondering, what was the thought process that went into that, taking into account how you knew your parents?
It's a very good question, and I initially knew that breaking it to my father was going to be 10 times more difficult than breaking it to my mother. My father lived abroad, much like you lived at a proximity from your parents as well, whereas I lived in my mother's house, so that was going to be the real difficult thing. So I started off by, Mom, Dad, I've got a real interest in the world religions. I'm trying to get religious. I'm just looking into different religions and stuff. Very general. I'm very interested in Buddhism, Judaism. And what I would do is, I was trying to get Islamic literature sent to my house by people who were willing to send it to people interested in Islam. And so what I would do is, I'd also at the same time, I'd see Hare Krishnas on the street in Scotland. And I'd looked into Hinduism. I'd looked into the Hare Krishna, if we could call it, cults of Hinduism. And I knew it was something that didn't appeal to my heart, but just to kind of mellow things out, I'd give the £1 donation and take the Bhagavad Gita from them and stuff, just so it looked like I had a plethora of books in my house. The way I finally broke it to my mother was I started downloading, and this is a whole separate topic we could get into in another episode, but we I know when I say we, I mean you and I know that we had a real interest in certain things which are part and parcel of Western culture, and one thing that we were both really interested in was music.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which of course Islam requires one to give up. And so one thing I tried to find as a replacement was nasheeds. Now, that's the worst thing to try and find as a replacement in many ways possible, because
Maybe not nowadays in Iraq, some of them are so close, but unfortunately.
that's a whole separate topic in and of itself, and I'll leave that to the jurists to discuss,
Exactly.
lest I get involved in a topic which is going to open up a can of worms.
Yeah.
But one thing I found was when we listened to these nasheeds, it was like a replacement for music, although it was like going from sophisticated art to having a baby doing finger paintings, so to speak. I mean, in terms of the distance.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, one thing, I tried my best to get into it, and I'd be playing them in my house, and my mom would start hearing stuff like, La ilaha illallah, and stuff like that, you know. And as a result, she would start saying stuff like, why are you listening to this? You're not a Muslim, Jesus Christ is very powerful. And so one day I just decided, you know, nope, Jesus Christ is very powerful, but he's a prophet and I'm a Muslim. And I was like, Mom, please just don't tell Dad about this. She's like, of course not, son. And the next thing I know,
First thing
I get a very brutal phone call from my father. So that's largely the reaction I had. And let me just say, this is one thing. So you have this at home, you have the constant fear of how you're going to live your life. So for example, I had to give up on all the meats at home that were being brought back. Especially, you can imagine a Filipino household. My mother is Filipina at the end of the day. There's a lot of pork involved in the diet. And even if there's no pork involved in the diet, there's a lot of non-halal meats being brought home. In fact, there's solely non-halal meats being brought home. And so as a result, I have to say, no, you start having to bring halal meats. And a lot of the time I have to do that from my own pocket. Because the philosophy is, why would I do that when I don't need to eat non-halal meat? And so it starts stinging where things hurt, so to speak. I'm constantly being threatened with the threat of being kicked out. So in this isolation, I make friends with the online community, everything seems beautiful. But at the end of the day, online friends are not real friends. They're merely voices you speak to over a phone or again on MSN. And you know, as has been exposed numerous times that I've seen in internet history, they're not always who they seem to be.
Absolutely.
So as a result, I wish to seek out a real community. As I mentioned, I was not yet upon the Islam of Ala Muhammad, but I found a community of general Muslims in Scotland and in my particular home city. And so when I went there, back to the issue of family problems, not only do you find you have family problems at home, but the first question you get is, have your parents become Muslim? Nope, sorry brother, they haven't, unfortunately not yet. May Allah guide them, inshallah. Have you tried speaking to them? Why don't you convert them?
Have you given them the Quran yet?
Yeah.
Have they read the Quran?
This question, it's one of those questions. Imam Hussein is my witness. You don't know whether or not you should laugh or cry. You could laugh out of those really extremely stressed, depressed, relieving laughs that you do when you're nervous, or you can cry at the situation that this poor soul does not understand that there's been a struggle to get here, and that my parents are not going to be cool with me saying, look Dad, you know, I'm your 15-year-old son who has not finished high school yet, has not got a job yet, has not experienced the world. What I want to tell you as a man in his early 50s, that you have got it all wrong, and that
You've got it all right.
I've got it all right, I possess 100% truth, and you need to start following me, coming to me for advice. This is just not going to float. My mother as well is also of a similar mentality, not going to be able to take hearing stuff from me about these issues. And more importantly, I'm worried about having a civilized conversation with my family after conversion, let alone a conversation in which I say, so, what are you going to say for Shahada?
Yeah. No, I mean, I remember thinking I would settle for an okay holiday.
Yeah.
You know, 5 minutes of dinner without something about like gender issues in Islam coming up or something.
Absolutely, absolutely. Even you're absolutely right. When it came to issues like that, my sibling, I only have one sibling, my older brother Stephen, particularly awkward and difficult conversations we were having, in which he failed to understand why he himself is a decent moral person, but he's failing to understand why someone who's younger than him has been known to be, I would say I'm not as good a person as my brother is in terms of morality and natural dispensation to be a good, moral, upright human being. He's probably wondering why someone like me has all of a sudden got interested in religion, especially when he's still got a very liberal view towards it. Yes, he believes in God, he believes in the Bible, he's a Christian,
Sure.
yet he doesn't feel the need to make it a holistic way of life.
Yep.
As you know, Christianity is not one religion which...
Sure. It's a confessional faith.
It's a confessional faith. It's not one which requires you to change your entire outward way of looking at things. And so the conversations I had with him got extremely tedious. Things like women's issues, things like race issues, things like slavery. And I would get people going, do you have any brothers? Are they Muslim yet? Have you given them the Quran yet? And ironically enough, I have actually given my brother a copy of the Quran since it's been approximately, well, I was about to say 10 years since I converted, but I will be 27 this year, so it's actually been 12 years since I converted, mashallah. One thing I found is that he's gotten more mature about the issue. I mean, certainly he's very respectful to me when I bring home my wife, when I bring home my kids. Still, he's not in a position where he's going to want to convert to a new religion.
I think we're going to go to a short break now, and inshallah we'll be back soon. Stay tuned. To conversations. Earlier we were speaking about the difficulties that converts can encounter with their families, both in terms of isolation or struggles that they may go through, as well as the type of isolation or rejection they can experience even from their new families, which are the religious community, the faith community that they're attempting to join. Sheikh Yahya had mentioned a particularly painful question that converts are very frequently asked, I think, which is if you converted your parents yet. It's usually like the second or third question in my experience. It's somewhere that, what about your family? You know, how far have you come with converting them? And I just wanted to touch on that briefly before we go back to what you were saying about your brother, which is for anyone who's watching who's not a convert, I'll address this to you, inshallah, that when you ask a question like this, it would be, try to imagine it the other way around. If I asked you, if you had become, let's say, Christian, you'd converted to Christianity or something, and inshallah, you stay on the straight path. But if you had done that, and then I said, and how's it going converting your family? Hopefully I don't need to say a lot more than that, but imagine the reaction that they would have, the fallout that would happen over something like that. It would be extreme. And that's happening, that would be, right, if we're talking about in a Western country where even Christianity is the predominant religion, so it's actually not that far-fetched.
Yeah.
Now, for us to then adopt Islam in a country that's majority Christian or whatever else, atheist even, it's an unfathomable kind of. And it brings up a lot of pain, I think. About
it brings a lot of pain. More importantly, when you're told that Alhamdulillah you converted, you know, like.
Alhamdulillah, you're not going to hell now.
Alhamdulillah, you're not going to hell. These kuffar are disgusting. Their culture is like this. And dare I say that this kind of rhetoric is a lot more common with, as I said, that when we talk about Islam, we believe, as our tafsir, our exegesis of the Quran states, Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, he is Sirat al-Mustaqim, and anything which follows in Islam other than him is a distortion of Islam. Mm-hmm. With the distortion of Islam, we often find that they are the first to bring this rhetoric. And when I converted into that distortion of Islam at first, before becoming a Shi'i and finding the wilayah of Ali Muhammad alayhi salam, I found that I was presented with this kind of talk, such as, oh, it's a good thing you're not going to go to hell, why don't you save them? You should save them from this filthy kind of culture that they're upon. it's not too nice to hear that about people that you are genuinely considerate about.
Sure.
You know, if you saw your family and there was fire on their clothing and you could see it was burning them slowly, you yourself would be the first person to want to put out that fire. Now, if you find that there's an obstacle in your way that prevents you from doing so, the last thing you need is to have your friends and colleagues pointing them out and going, look, your family's on fire, what are you doing about it? I'm sorry, there's this massive obstacle in front of me and I'm unable to jump over it to get to them. I'm working on it. I don't need you to point out to me that they're on fire.
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually a very apt metaphor for it.
Well, I find this, as I said at the start of the episode, it's a very personal issue and it's one I feel very passionately about, so to speak.
You'd think that there might be some more sensitivity about it, just because, you know, someone has a brain in their head, for one thing, and also because your family must have done something right.
Yeah.
Because you became Muslim.
I like that kind of optimism. However, Shaikh Daniel, allow me to be perfectly clear cut. There's a new generation amongst the ranks of the Shia scholarship who, and not, let's just not call them scholarship, but amongst the Shi'i community, amongst our youth, who are saying things like, oh, you don't have to worry about them. They're Jews and Christians, you know. God might let them into paradise upon the religion that they're on. This kind of talk does not help me either, because I would like to save them. I'd like to bring them to the truth who are Ali Muhammad. It's not that I don't doubt, it's not that I doubt God's mercy. I know that God is merciful and Allah Azza wa Jal will deal with everybody according to His mercy. But at the same time, we know that Ali Muhammad are the truth and we want everyone to come to them. So this reactionary side which says, don't worry about them, you know.
It's all good.
It's all good, you know, everybody has their own truth.
Yes.
We could do a little less with that too.
Before we went to break, you were talking about the relationship with your brother.
Absolutely.
And how that was
Absolutely.
impacted.
I think that the relationship with my brother was one I had to explore in order to allow the viewer to understand that with your parents, there's the immediate problem of the generation gap, which causes many misunderstandings. Now, with your sibling, there's an even more awkward aura in the conversation after you convert, because you find that they're of a similar age range. They think they can understand you. They understand what your peers are into. So they're going to be a lot more frank with you. My brother would tell me stuff like, come on, you're a weirdo, you know. Who's interested in religion at this age? Why at this age, you know? They bring up things that you do in the past. They say, what, you think you're a saint nowadays? Don't you remember doing this? And so the kind of relationship I had with my brother became probably for many years the most awkward relationship that I had in my family. And I think this is something that people need to understand, because again, as I said, first question you're asked when you enter a mosque is, why did you convert? Second question you might be asked is, it's a plethora of two. If you say that I converted for X reason, and you give your whole full narrative, you might be told, are you married? Yeah. And if you answer yes, you might be told, did you convert for your wife, even though you've given them your whole conversion story, which should tell them that no, you did not convert for your wife.
Honestly, I think you'd be lucky to get that far. For a lot of converts, basically, it's why did you convert? How did you convert? And that's the first and last question that they're asked before they're on the outside.
I tend to find that no, I'm not. I'm asked, why did you convert? Have you converted your parents yet? Are your parents Muslim? And do you have any siblings? If so, are they Muslim? Why haven't you converted them yet? Very insensitive questions, questions which people need to know. But as you said, it's akin to me saying to them, if they converted to Christianity, have you converted your parents yet? And we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to prevent any Muslims from entering into deviation and deviating from Ali Muhammad and joining any deviation from Ali Muhammad, be it Christianity or atheism or anything that does not emanate or come from Ali Muhammad.
So the hadith says, from the Imam, everything that comes out from anything other than this house is falsehood.
Absolutely.
I find in my own experience, I had sort of the, maybe it sounds, from the view of my parents, I'm trying to put this together, it was a little bit in reverse, in the sense that my father had actually a very positive reaction, despite him being the religious parent between the two of them. He's Catholic, and I was raised Catholic from, God, I don't know, as far as back as I remember. Sunday
Sure.
school, everything, to Catholic high school. My mother, who is not religious, was actually the one who had the negative reaction to it. And for me, it could not have come at a worse time, because our relationship had been for many years very, very strained. And it was just starting to get better. And so when they show up for my my graduation from graduate school, whatever, very prestigious university and all this stuff.
Proud moments.
They find
Eldest,
out-
you're the eldest child, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
the oldest son's graduation, this prestigious moment, they covered your studies, I'm sure, too, right?
Yeah.
So they financially covered your studies. You were coming for your graduation. You break the news. How
When
does
they
this
break
go?
out the champagne, then I break the news. My mother was, I think, stunned. Later, I thought she took it okay at the time, but later, over time, more resentment I'd feel more of that coming from her. And it got to the point where, I wouldn't necessarily, I would maybe avoid phone calls, or I would, we'd since undergrad, since college, I had sort of lived apart from them. So we were not like a nightly phone conversation family.
Sure.
But even holidays, I would prefer not to spend them at home.
Well, you're fortunate you did it. Well, actually, F1. I was going to say I feel quite fortunate that I did it at such a young age, because I have a feeling if I did my announcement at such a prestigious event as my graduation, and if there was a champagne bottle involved, with a Scottish tradition of thuggery known as bottling people, and I fear that my father might have taken that champagne bottle and not only broken it open, but broken something else, and...
I mean, alhamdulillah, that didn't happen. But anyway, since then it's been a constant struggle, and unfortunately, when you mention these other distortions of Islam that are out there, this is where a lot of her negative views about the religion come from.
Absolutely.
And it's something that I always have to end up fielding questions about, or accusations more often, that are about this sort of off-brand of Islam, and
just to make clear here, we are not in any way trying to incite division between Muslims here.
Sure.
We believe in coexistence, and we believe that we all, in this modern day era, deserve to coexist as free human beings, and especially in the West, where there's a lot of
absolutely.
misconceptions about Islam in the first place. We believe that we need to coexist in a way that there's no one killing each other over anyone's beliefs, but at the same time, we must highlight that there is a difference between the Islam of Al Muhammad, the Islam of Sayyid al-Shuhada, Imam al-Hussein, alayhi salam, who was martyred by filthy, corrupt, disgusting criminals claiming to be Muslims.
by terrorists.
By terrorists who were claiming to be Muslims, just as we see that today's world suffers from terrorists who claim to be Muslim. And we pray that our Shi'i viewers who are born Muslim come to understand that we live in an era in which it is crucial that we present ourselves as the nation, the followers of Al Muhammad alayhi salam, and not people who follow a distorted Islam which encourages bloodshed and fasad in the name of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam.
No, and it was very good. And I was thinking, I hope my parents get satellite at some point. They can see this. My mother will call me and say,
Inshallah.
"I get it. I was wrong." Yeah.
Excellent.
The other aspect of this, the other side of this coin of alienation from your family, oftentimes it's coupled with or made more painful by alienation from the community that you're trying to enter into.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And
This
part of it
something-
is those questions, and part of it is potentially,
Part of it's just a failure to understand you.
yeah,
A large part of it is just a failure to understand you. Look, let me be quite honest with you here. One of the problems of modernity, one of the problems of living in the West, where you have many of our predecessors, our uncles and aunties, as we would refer to them from our community, those who migrated firsthand to the West, are people who sought economic success. Many a time they might have even thought to themselves they will be returning back to their mother nations, and so as a result did not come with a thought of establishing religion in the West, let alone a thought of establishing religion amongst their children's generation.
Sure.
As a result of a failure to have that foresight, what we find is many of the youths understand what their religion is, but are attracted to ideologies alien from the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, and ideologies which conform with Western liberalism. And so to a degree, when they meet a convert like you, who's come from Western liberalism to the Ahlul Bayt, even if they don't mentally acknowledge it, deep down in their subconsciousness, they're thinking to themselves, why is this weird guy going from that which we want to go to and coming to that which we want to run away from?
You know, I think it's not just that. I think part of it, it's absolutely, in some cases, I'm sure that's spot on, you know, but the sense that I get sometimes, for instance, even speaking at centers or just participating in religious worship in centers, when I speak with people and they want to hear about my conversion, I get the sense that what they want to hear about really
is how great they are.
Yeah, is how great their
validation,
their nationality, their race, their religion, and they tend to conflate all of those things together. How much better it is than this corrupt Western culture, which for some reason they moved to. But
so essentially, you don't need to give a speech. You could just do one gesture, and they would be happy.
Yeah,
just as happy with a speech.
Just pat them on the back, and yeah, exactly.
And the happiness would come out, and they would start thinking to themselves, "This is awesome. This is exactly what we wanted to hear.
See, even
we're right.
This guy,
they're wrong.
Yeah.
He admits it.
Yeah.
He's white.
Yeah.
Proof we are right."
So I don't want to overgeneralize. You know, I don't want to make it sound like all of the people in these communities or people who are born Muslim or whatever have do these things or say these things or are sort of don't necessarily think about what they're saying so much. But it's also, they're not uncommon problems, you know. I think anyone who's a convert to the religion can probably identify safely with a real conservative estimate 50% of what we've been saying, and I think most of them probably 80 or 90%.
Well,
they've encountered at some point.
I'm an optimist to a degree, so I'd like to believe that they can relate to 5% of what we're saying. Unfortunately, I believe the statistic
You're more pragmatic than that. Come on.
Probably around the remit of 60% of what we've been saying. And I pray that Allah Azza wa Jal, through this show, through my efforts and your efforts here, which have real shortcomings, by the way. What we are discussing is not something which we have gone into much detail into, but we really hope that the community might be able to a degree, appreciate what many of the converts go through and try and at least rectify their behavior. Even if it's on an individual level, this is the main outcome that I would hope a show like this would be able to instill and produce in the community.
I find there's two, how do I put this? There's one of the problems I encounter when I speak with converts about these issues is that there is sometimes miscommunications on both sides. There's legitimate grievances they have. And then sometimes there's other grievances where maybe it's either a failure of understanding on their part or integration has to come from both sides, I guess is what I'm trying to say to some extent. However, my hope for something like this program is that it is something that's both a comfort for converts in the sense that they're able to watch it and to know that the struggles that they go through are not individual struggles.
And they're not in vain either.
Yeah, exactly. And for communities to know that there are changes that it's upon them to make, but that it's very possible for them to make those changes.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And I think it can make them better and stronger community.
And more importantly, it would bring them more in line with the message of Ahlul Bayt. Look who is behind us, dear viewers. We are right behind Sayyid al-Shuhada. Look at the encampment of Sayyid al-Shuhada, who after the Ahlul Bayt and after the prophets of God, we believe, according to Islamic theology, are the greatest people to have walked upon the face of this earth in history, and no one will come who is greater than them that is not from the Imams. We believe that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam forgave and embraced in his encampment converts from Christianity, converts from Nasibiism, who were the very reason for why he was going to be killed. People like Hur ibn Yazid al-Riyahi.
Wahab, not who is on the other side.
Wahab, of course, being the Christian, and Hur ibn Yazid al-Riyahi being on the enemy camp. And so if Abu Abdullah alayhi salam can embrace such people and give them a status, which is a status so high in Islam that no one other than the Ahlul Bayt and the Prophets will ever reach this status, then surely you can open your arms and embrace the convert. For we believe that Allah Azza wa Jal has revealed Islam as the final religion, the religion for all of mankind, and that we wish to guide everyone to it. How can this guidance occur if we are closing our doors and showing disgusting akhlaq towards these people? I know occasionally it's merely shortcomings, it's a misunderstanding on our behalfs, but please understand there are implications for those of you who do not consider these things. And if we stop acting upon the way that we have previously been acting upon, inshallah ta'ala, the doors will open and many more converts will come.
Inshallah.
We pray to Allah Azza wa Jal that Allah Azza wa Jal would use this show in order to inform you, dear viewers, those of you who are not from convert backgrounds, as to how to act with your converts. Take the things we have said into account so that many more may come to the message of Allah Muhammad, and particularly come to the message of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam.
Well, I think that does it for this episode. Inshallah, you'll join us for future episodes as well. Dear viewers, that does it for this episode. Inshallah, if you'd like to join the conversation, you may do so by writing at the email address on screen. And inshallah, we'll see you next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.